Hey, it's Mattea. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen today. If you've been enjoying Bookends, why don't you give us a follow on your favorite podcast app? This will ultimately help us make more episodes and also connect you with more of your favorite authors. And don't forget to leave a review. It helps us get the word out to others who might enjoy the show. I hope you liked today's episode, and thanks again so much for listening. Hi, I'm Mattea Roach. Welcome to Bookends. When I heard we were going to have the writer and fitness advocate Casey Johnston on the show, I got pretty excited because her first book and weightlifting guide, Lift Off, was a big part of my own fitness journey a couple years back. Casey used to think that fitness was all about shrinking down, but after years of dieting and running, she realized that her happiness and self-confidence were shrinking too. But then Casey discovered weightlifting. It promised a way for her to get fit without compromising on food and rest. What followed was a deep dive into the world of barbells, bulking, and body recomposition. And this is where Casey realized that a lot of what we're taught about fitness and strength is misleading or just plain wrong. She writes about this journey in her new book. It's called A Physical Education: How I Escaped Diet Culture and Gained the Power of Lifting. Casey Johnston joined me for this conversation from her home in Los Angeles. Hi, Casey.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Your book starts off talking about your experiences with dieting and then doing a lot of cardio, which is, I think, especially for women, this sort of exercise that we are told is good to do if you want to be lean, if you want to be, like, I'm doing air quotes, toned. What was the moment when you realized that this was not a way of working out that was working for you?
Mm-hmm. Yes, there was a moment where I realized that I was working so hard and all I wanted was for all of these things to gel at some point where I realized I was hoping for this moment when everything would feel like it clicked and I would not have to be trying so hard. It didn't take so much effort and so much of my mental energy and physical energy in order to just be comfortable in my body. I didn't have to worry about my weight or what I was eating, that I would be able to eat kind of without thinking and exercise without thinking, and it would all just sort of fit. But I found that the longer it went on, the more kind of maintenance it seemed to take, the more energy and the more attention.
I'm curious also, just even the thought of pursuing fitness, that this is something that was such a priority for you that you had to get into some kind of optimizing the body. Where did that come from for you, do you think?
I mean, I tried to take a really honest inventory over the course of writing this book of how my thoughts have been shaped over and my view of myself and all of these of working out and food over the course of my life. I mean, there's cultural forces, there's the stuff we read in magazines, the sort of the ubiquitous presence of doctors who present themselves, the sort of celebrity doctors who present themselves as having all of these quick, easy answers. There's there were at the time women's magazines that had so much to say about the best fruits for weight loss, etc. But then there was also my own family background and this dynamic of my father was an alcoholic. My mother, I think we all struggled with that. My mother had her own sort of traumatic background, and it really created this dynamic of when I was a child that I had to I always had to be on my toes. It was very performance oriented in a way that I felt like I had to maximize my own performance to make everything as okay, as safe as possible for myself. And that's not something that kids should have to go through, but it sort of permeated outward into how I saw my place in the world, which was that my role, my job as a person was to be responsive to all of these instructions that I was getting, that I had to produce my own safety and my own place in the world through this kind of hard work of following all these instructions that people were giving in order for acceptance. And that really colored my perception of things.
So you're in this spot where running, cardio, dieting is not working for me. I've kind of reached a point where I can't go any further with it. And you come across this Reddit post that clearly made an impact on you if you're still talking about it these many years later, about this woman named Mattea who had a different approach to fitness, and she gets really into weightlifting, and she's posting pictures on Reddit and details about her progress. What sorts of things did she reveal to you about dieting and strength? What spoke to you in her story?
When I saw this post, I was completely blown away by it, because I had always been told that lifting weights will make you bulky, that if you just sort of want to lose weight, that lifting weights is sort of a bridge too far, unless you want to be some mega strength person. So I was fascinated when I came across this post. Here was this woman. She had posted pictures of herself that a lot of times when you see before and after photos, they're about the exaggerated transformation, right? Like, I was used to seeing infomercials for weight loss products where, people had really changed a lot. What was fascinating to me was actually that her body hadn't changed that much. It had changed in minor sort of ways, and I liked the aesthetic changes, but I was like, I'd been warned up and down how much lifting weights would do everything you didn't want. And to look at her pictures, I was like, she's not that different. And not only that, in her description of what she was doing, she was only working out 3 times a week. She was only doing 5 reps at a time of like 3 movements for a few sets, and then she was done. So that was taking her 30 minutes. She was eating way more than I was at that time. And even despite all of these inputs that were what I had been warned away from all my life, she was here doing all of these things that I had been told not to do. And she was not only fine, but she was so happy and having a great time.
Your journey with weightlifting begins at this local gym called Richie's, which you describe as this kind of like scrappy place with a lot of very well-loved equipment, let's say. What was it like to step into that world for the first time after having been a pretty serious runner and cardio-oriented person, let's say?
I was terrified. It was so intimidating to me. I mean, any weight room, in 2014 at least, appeared to be full of all of these people who were really jacked, really about their business, really know what they're doing. They're like, and you're kind of, at minimum, afraid you're going to just be in their way, where it's like they need this equipment more than I do. They know what they're doing. They're way stronger than I am. And at worst, you have the macho man who is, has a problem with women in general, but especially women who might dare to step into this space where they want to intimidate you out of there. They might stare at you, leer at you, say things to you like that. I don't want to put myself in the way of this. I had built up this whole thing in my head of what might happen. I had fought so many battles before I even stepped foot in there, but I was compelled enough by the overall concept of what could happen if I tried this that I was like, okay, I have to just give this a try. And I was not, it speaks to how compelling the concept of lifting was, that I was willing to put myself in that situation, as apprehensive as I was.
At the point where you decided, you know what, I want to really transform my relationship with working out and with eating, was there any sense that people around you were not down with the fact that you were changing your orientation towards these things?
As I had gotten older and gotten to be an adult and was able to sort of choose my surroundings and friends a little more deliberately, that Dieting and working out were not topics that I spent a lot of time on in discussion with my friends. There were sort of glancing acknowledgments of, oh, this is like a horrible task that we have to deal with, and I hate working out and those kinds of things. But it was not something that I didn't have a friend who I would like do a diet with together or anything like that. It was very internal to myself, and I was all about my brain and my smart thoughts, and not about my body in a way that I talked to anyone about, even though it was a huge preoccupation for me going on in my mind all of the time. So I didn't really have anyone who I would clue into this journey. I imagined that if I did, even, that everyone would think it was kind of weird. I think they would think it was not me to be into lifting, the perception being that, oh, she's going to go down a rabbit hole of becoming a bodybuilder, or it's going to get weird fast, sort of. Because that was the perception that I also had, that people who lift have a really intense, consuming relationship with it. If you get into lifting, it becomes like your whole life. And I was afraid of people thinking that about me. So I didn't tell anyone really that I was doing it for a long time. Not like it was a really deliberate secret, or I was like sneaking to the gym in a disguise, but I just didn't share that part of my life with anyone. But it was kind of nice, because I think I needed that sandbox of trying something out and having my own relationship with it.
What was the reaction like when eventually you did kind of open up and start talking about lifting more with people who didn't know that side of you?
I think sort of similar to going to the gym, it was more positive than I was expecting. I think I could still sense that people thought it would go in a extreme direction, but they were kind of into it. They were like, oh, like, make a muscle. Let me see your muscles, like arm wrestle me, all of these things. And it was sort of fun and funny to talk about. And I also got to a point where I was so enamored of and compelled by and excited by all of the things that I was learning and going through, that I started talking about it and then just couldn't stop. It was like, I need to share this information that I have discovered that I feel like not enough people know, and that it could be as transformative to their lives as it was to mine. And it felt like just the simple set of facts that if everyone could just know it, they would be able to join me on this journey.
I think for me, as somebody who's like a big memoir reader, I really was struck by a lot of the personal stories that you share that are even like less related to weightlifting, if that makes sense. Like, you do delve into some tough stuff relating to things that were going on in your family in your young adulthood. I know you mentioned earlier that you grew up in a house where your father was an alcoholic. As much as you're comfortable talking about, because obviously it's very difficult, very personal, why was that something that needed to go in this book? Because I was really just riveted by that part of it and kind of wanted to know more about how that ties into your relationship with working out.
Mm-hmm. I think it does. It goes back to the honest inventory of how did this all come together for me. I think that it's so difficult to take a really close, unsparing look at your personal life, and even to sort of, I think so many of us, we have a equilibrium that rests on the sort of perception of our families as normal. Everyone has these problems, but we might fight or whatever, but we love each other at the end of the day. So it's difficult to open the Pandora's box of maybe everything wasn't so okay. Maybe a lot of this was very difficult to go through or be a witness to. And more importantly, to not have anyone who could validate or help process those experiences. If you have a family where not only are things happening that are uncomfortable or traumatic, but there's no one to sort of help you recognize what happened and process that experience. And you end up sort of just pushing everything down. But I think that the more that I thought about it, I just felt that this dynamic really shaped so much of how I saw myself and my relationship to other people.
I think the reason I found it so interesting, like two things. One is that I actually first discovered your guide to weightlifting, like your sort of almost pamphlet type publication, Lift Off, shortly after my dad died, and got kind of into lifting and was like finding a lot of joy and just ability to be present in my body in the gym at that time. So I was like, oh, the weird connection. And it was transformative. Like it completely did change my orientation towards working out.
Oh my God. I feel so honored that was there for you in that time.
Also made me think of the fact that a very close friend of mine who also lost a parent kind of young, early 20s, shortly after their father passed away, said a line to me that I will never forget, which is, Mattea, ever since my dad died, I've gotten really into baseball, energy drinks, and working out. And I think about it all the time. I don't know if there is something in that it can be kind of like a flashpoint moment, Joker moment that causes maybe you to want to get really into traditionally masculine activities, that there's like some kind of connection there. I don't know. Like, do you have any thoughts on that? That's just like, I think about this a lot.
Yeah, I think I didn't get to dive fully into this as I wanted to in the book, but there is maybe a sort of backwards connection too in the fact that both my parents were pretty athletic people. My dad was like a 3-sport athlete, and part of this was realizing that was such a big part, such a formative part of my childhood. One of the good parts, really, that it was like for all of this difficulty that that our family had when I was growing up, one of the sort of grounding, centering things was our relationship to each other in play and sports. And that was like one of the pure aspects of it. So it's almost kind of like when my dad died and then I got so hardcore into running after, and then several years later got into lifting, like it was not a deliberate thing at that time, but to look back on it now, it is kind of like I was feeling around in the dark for that aspect of my life that subconsciously I must have known this is a part of me and I need to sort of restore it to myself. And I haven't figured out the way to do it yet, but I'm feeling around in the dark for it is probably the best term.
You talk about, a relationship to strength that's rooted in the idea of kind of like community, like non-competitive, just being really invested in the process. And I mean, clearly, like weightlifting is something that you found a lot of joy in. It's working for you, but you also do kind of keep pushing yourself to lift more. You talk about your processes of going through bulking to try and build up muscle in this book and bumping up your calorie consumption to do that. Was there ever a point in your lifting journey where you felt concerned at all that this was like going back to old habits of like, I'm pushing myself just to push myself and this could be getting into a bad place for me?
What I keep coming back to is that there's so many mechanisms that are inherently about building yourself up, about protecting yourself, and building a relationship with yourself really was the most important part of it to me. Like there's this just atomic unit of lifting that I hadn't experienced in any other physical activity, though you could apply it, just no one does, but it was more built into lifting. You would do a rep or do a set and ask yourself, how did that feel? What was my experience of that? Was the weight too heavy? Was it too light? How did my form feel? Do I feel like I'm feeling this in the right muscles? And a lot of these questions, you don't know the answer at first. And that, most importantly, is okay. But you're encouraged in this practice of inquiry of yourself and your experience of something. And that to me was so significant because pursuant to my personal background and pursuant to how a lot of us, but women especially, are treated in cultures to discourage inquiry of your experience, to push down whatever it is that you're feeling because someone else's feelings are more important, because someone else has greater needs than you. And That's not to say that you are the most important person in any room, but that this is a experience of yourself that radiates outward, and the experience of asking myself how I felt in lifting encouraged me to develop that practice more outside in the world. And I was able to understand how I was feeling about so many other things in a way that I had never done before.
You're very analytical, you know, in the way that you talk and in the way that you talk in this book as well. And it's, I think, pretty clear in the way that you write. Your background in journalism and in tech reporting comes through, and you turn that journalistic lens a bit in a physical education onto the fitness industry. I think anyone who gets fitness content targeted to them on social media can probably relate to or identify like fitness accounts that are really just tapped into the algorithm, that are telling you about how to get abs in 2 weeks or the best diet that's going to give you a beach body for the summer. I'm curious for you now, as somebody who still works online, promotes your work and your content and shares your newsletter, your column online. How do you find yourself engaging with the online fitness ecosystem?
I mean, I was very present on Instagram for years. I mean, I started using Instagram the year it came out, within a few months of it coming out. Like, I've been on there so long. And I was on TikTok a little bit. So I was on there, and I also saw other women lifting weights on Instagram back in like 2014. And I got there through the sort of Monterey world, and that was super compelling to me. I was so excited to see these women who were having an incredible time lifting, but without any particular grand ambitions. They were just like really enjoying it. It was like it was more of the Monterey post, where I was like, there's this whole world. And that was almost like a primordial state of Instagram, it feels like now, because now there's an algorithm, now there's reels, there's all these rules that you have to follow in order to reach any kind of audience on these platforms. And it's become, I think, kind of toxic, even if it doesn't feel like that on its face. The ways you have to be so prescriptive or sort of push a counterintuitive or surprising angle that kind of makes people go, like, their jaws drop a little. They go, what? Oh God, I have to watch this to the end. Like, this doesn't make sense. I think ultimately it's very difficult to communicate about something as complicated as bodies and food and fitness are, especially our relationships to them. I think I kind of feel like the tippiness of social media it doesn't dignify our relationships with all of this stuff sufficiently. I think you can't tip your way out of what most people are trying to solve or what they're trying to get out of social media. It's not really going to deliver it to them. It's too fragmented. There's not enough space for the consideration that it needs. So that's how I think about my relationship to it, is that I kind of want to encourage the inquiry, encourage the consideration, and dignify all of these areas in our lives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I did also, in preparation for this interview, look through some of your social media, found, Instagram photos of you doing this annual Christmas tree carry where you like haul a tree home, which I was trying to think, like, how would I even like maneuver my arms in such a way that I can physically lift a tree like any distance, forget about walking it around my neighborhood. You talk a lot about this, there's this image that you use where you talk about in the past struggling to carry a bag of cat litter, a physical object that I can much more easily conceive of how to wrap your arms around it, back to your apartment before you started lifting. And now, you can haul that 40-pound bag of cat litter around. It's no problem. What do you think that person who was struggling would think looking at you now?
That's an interesting question, because I don't know. I think of that sometimes, just like in relation to so many things. It's like, what would your younger self think if you could tell them, like, oh, you're doing this now? And some of it has to do with, if you could go back in time and like say one sentence to yourself, what would it be? And if my one sentence was like, you lift weights now and you love it, it would send that person probably into a spiral of trying to somehow trying to prevent my fate, trying to do everything possible to keep myself from falling into this trap of lifting weights, because I was so convinced that was a dangerous path. It would mean that I had like lost touch with reality almost to be lifting weights. And of course, now I know better. But it definitely would blow us for a certain swath of my life. If I could go back and tell my past self, it would blow my mind. I wouldn't be able to conceive of it. It would terrify me. I would not be able to understand how I got to that point. But just shows my lack of imagination or empathy, consideration for myself, then I think that's been a big lesson, is that I was really closed-minded about this thing that in myself, that there is room for me to engage in these things without it being dangerous to my sense of self or who I am, or that if it changes how people perceive me, that's only to the good, because anyone whose perception is negatively colored by something like, oh, she lifts weights, it's like, you don't want to be involved with that person anyway. So
yeah, that's not an opinion I need to take into consideration when I'm assessing how I think about myself. Yes. I want to ask, lastly, I know you had a baby recently and are a new mom. Very exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How do you think, as your kid grows up, you're going to talk about fitness and bodies with them? Because I imagine it's probably going to be very different than how your parents would have approached these subjects with you growing up.
Yes. Speak of.
Yeah, I can hear. Yeah, I can hear
Sorry.
Baby in the background. It's all good. It's adding life and dimension to our conversation.
I know, for real. Yes, I've thought about this a lot, and it's part of becoming a parent is like, I think I'm trying to prepare myself in a way, because it's like, while you're the parent and you play such a big role, obviously, in the things you say, it's like you can only protect them so much from the world, which is so overwhelming in its messaging. But I think a lot about how I want to present my relationship with myself, which is still not always, perfect and all love and light. But I think about when I'm just like looking at my baby, I'm like, I just never want him to feel how I've felt, like how I feel like the world has made me feel sometimes, or like my life experiences have made me feel about myself. I'm just like, and in ways that I felt that I deserve it, not in a really literal way, but just like there's an inherent feeling of, oh, I deserve to feel this badly about myself, because that's how I understand the world. And I just like, I can't imagine ever having this precious little man ever have to feel that way. I'm just like, I have to protect him. I want to protect him to the extent that I can from ever feeling this way about himself. And I want to project as much confidence and acceptance of all bodies and things people do with their bodies, and the challenge and empathy for the challenges that we have. I mean, it's like there's so much, but his, life is long and it's an everyday thing. And you're always in your body. You're never escaping this corporeal form. It's where you live. But that means that your care of it is so important, and that how you feel in it matters, because you have to be in yourself every day. So it's like similarly with teaching a new person about the world, it's a practice. You want to keep it up every day and be okay with the journey of it versus trying to make it a destination, I guess.
Casey, thank you so much for chatting with me today. It's been so much fun talking with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was Casey Johnston. Her new book is called A Physical Education. This episode was produced by Liv Pasquarelli. Ailey Yamamoto is our associate producer. Our senior producer is Jacqueline Kirk, and our executive producer is Aaron Balser. A huge shout out to our audio tech, Aronde Williams, and everyone on the CBC Books team who bring you the goods on our socials and our website. I'm Mattea Roach, and this is Bookends. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a fellow book lover or weightlifting lover. Bookends is actually, according to some of my coworkers, the perfect thing to listen to at the gym. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Because when the book ends, the conversation begins.